a chosen one. What I am about to share with you was not written for a general audience scrolling past at random. It was written for you specifically on this exact day. July 23 is not simply a date circled for dramatic effect. It is a marker, and I want you to open your heart fully as we walk through what it means. You did not click on this by accident. Something in your spirit has been sensing a shift even before you had language for it, and July 23 is the day that shift is finally becoming visible. Isaiah 55 verse 11 says, "So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it." That means what is spoken over your life carries weight, purpose and momentum, whether or not you can see it moving yet. There are transactions happening in the unseen right now that your natural eyes were never meant to track directly. The delay you have been feeling, the sense that breakthrough is always just around the corner but never quite arriving, has a shape to it. And that shape is finally shifting. Psalm 37 verse 23 declares, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way." Even the step that brought you here, choosing to listen with your whole heart instead of scrolling past, was ordered. Sometimes there has been resistance in the unseen realm, delaying a release that was already decided long before it ever became visible to you. If your own waiting has felt unusually long or unusually hard, that difficulty was never proof the promise had failed. It was simply evidence that something worth delaying was actually on its way. I want to be honest with you about something important. This is not hype, dressed up in spiritual language. This is not manufactured urgency meant to keep you watching. What I am describing is real, and it deserves to be received with the same seriousness you would give any genuinely significant news arriving in your life. Open your heart fully. What is coming is for you. You may have already sensed something shifting in recent weeks, a restlessness that does not quite match your circumstances, a quiet expectation rising even when nothing visible has changed yet. That is not coincidence. It is your spirit recognizing something your natural senses have not yet been given permission to see clearly. Trust that recognition rather than talking yourself out of it. Over the sections ahead, we are going to walk through exactly what this transfer touches, what it requires from you, and why it reaches further than your own life alone. Stay with me. What heaven has prepared, it will not withhold. Before we go further, if you believe this word is for you, type "I receive this" in the comments below. Let it be your declaration, not just words on a screen. And if you want to keep walking through messages like this one, go ahead and subscribe now, so you do not miss what is coming next. 1. Your name is on the vault. A stirring is rising in your spirit right now, and I want you to feel the weight of it, not the weight that burdens, but the weight that awakens. You have prayed, you have wept, you have wrestled quietly in rooms no one else entered, and heaven has marked this hour with your name on it. None of this is emotional decoration meant to make you feel encouraged for a moment before you return to routine unchanged. What is being described here is weighty, sacred, and specific. A vault blessing is never distributed randomly. It is reserved deliberately, held for the exact person who kept believing when belief no longer made obvious sense to anyone watching from the outside. Malachi 3 verse 10 says, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." That is not a small promise offered casually. It describes abundance so complete it exceeds the capacity of ordinary containers to hold it. What is being released is not random. It is reserved, set apart specifically for someone who kept believing when belief made little logical sense. Psalm 65 verse 11 declares, "Thou crownest the year with thy goodness, and thy paths drop fatness." Notice the word crownest. Far from a partial gesture, it is a completion, closing out a season with the exact abundance that season was actually building toward the entire time. The mailbox has been checked twice on a day when nothing was actually expected to arrive. That small habit, easy to dismiss, reveals something honest about waiting. a quiet hope that refuses to fully give up, even when logic says there is nothing left to check for. If that describes you lately, take it as a sign rather than a coincidence. Hope that persists without obvious reason is often hope responding to something real it cannot yet fully explain. Isaiah 22 verse 22 speaks of keys that open doors no one shut and shut doors no one can open. That is the kind of access being placed in your hands now, not a temporary convenience, but authority over doors that shape the rest of your story. This week, name specifically, out loud or in writing, what you believe has been reserved for you. Vague hope is easy to abandon under pressure, or specific expectation is harder to talk yourself out of. Heaven is not asking you to manufacture certainty. It is asking you to stop hedging your hope down to something safer than what has actually been promised. Wishing and expecting are not the same posture, and the distinction matters, because they produce very different results in daily life. Wishing stays passive, hoping something might eventually happen without requiring anything to change in how you actually live. Expectation is active. It prepares. Someone truly expecting a guest arriving soon cleans the space, sets a place at the table, watches for the car in the driveway. If your current posture toward this promise looks more like passive wishing than active preparation, that gap is worth closing. Ask yourself plainly what you would actually do differently this week if you were fully certain the promise was arriving. And then do at least one of those things now, before the certainty fully arrives to convince you. Notice something important about how vaults typically work. They are not accessible to just anyone who happens to walk by. They require a specific combination, a specific key, a specific identity confirmed before anything inside becomes available. The same is true here. What has been set aside was never meant for casual claiming. It required exactly the kind of perseverance you already demonstrated simply by staying faithful through the waiting. 2. Heaven is active, hell is nervous. If pressure has intensified lately, if distractions seem to multiply from every direction, if doubt keeps interrupting places where your faith once stood steady, hear this plainly: heaven is moving, and what is stirring against you is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of proximity. Do not mistake this season for evidence that you have somehow slipped out of favor. Increased pressure, at exactly the moment your growth accelerates, is one of the most consistent patterns in Scripture, visible in nearly every major figure who eventually walked in significant assignment. But the pattern is not a coincidence. It is simply how this kind of process tends to work. John 10 verse 10 says, "The thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." Resistance rarely targets what carries no weight. It targets exactly what is about to matter. A particular exhaustion comes from fighting thoughts that were not originally yours, insecurities that surface out of nowhere, doubts that whisper louder at night than they ever did in daylight. 1 Peter 5 verse 8-9 instructs, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour, whom resist steadfast in the faith." Vigilance here is not paranoia. It is simply staying awake to what is actually happening rather than absorbing every thought as though it originated in your own heart. 2 Corinthians 10 verse 3-5 reminds you what kind of battle this actually is. "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ." Notice that thoughts themselves are named as the battlefield, not primarily your circumstances, your mind. A budget spreadsheet closed and untouched for months gets reopened without being asked. That single action, small and easy to overlook, often marks the exact moment resignation quietly turns back into engagement. Watch for versions of that shift in your own life this week. Moments where you find yourself reaching back towards something you had quietly given up managing. This resistance you feel is not a verdict against you. It is confirmation that something in you has become worth fighting. Hell does not waste strategy on someone posing no threat to what it wants to keep in place. The very intensity of what you are facing is proof of what is actually at stake. A specific pattern is worth learning to recognize here. The enemy rarely attacks in a single obvious blow. He tends to layer small frustrations, minor doubts, and inconvenient distractions until they compound into something that feels much larger than any individual piece would suggest on its own. Or naming that pattern out loud, simply recognizing it for what it is, often strips a significant portion of its power immediately. A genuine spiritual resistance and simple poor timing can actually be told apart. And the difference matters, because confusing the two leads to real mistakes. Ask 3 questions honestly. First, did the resistance appear specifically after a season of spiritual growth, prayer, or commitment, rather than existing as a constant baseline problem? Second, does the resistance disproportionately target your focus, your peace, and your relationships, rather than pointing to a genuine logistical error you can correct? Third, does stepping back into prayer and stillness noticeably calm the intensity, even without your circumstances changing at all? If the answer to most of these is yes, you are likely facing resistance tied to growth rather than a signal to abandon course. If the answer is no, the wiser response may simply be practical correction rather than spiritual warfare language applied to an ordinary mistake. 3. Miracles require engagement. There comes a point where the question shifts from what God has promised to what you are actually willing to step into. The vault is open. The blessing carrying your name is not theoretical. But heaven is now watching for your response, because miracles, however supernatural, require something real from the person receiving them. Well, heaven is not a vending machine where requests get inserted and outcomes emerge automatically without any relationship required. It is partnership, a genuine exchange between what God has already decided and what you are willing to agree with in faith. Miracles do not flow simply because they were promised. They flow where agreement between heaven's intention and human response actually meets. James 2 verse 17 says plainly, "Even so faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone." Too often we wait for God to do what he is actually waiting on us to agree with. Where he has prepared the release, he will not force it into hands that remain closed. Hebrews 11 verse 6 reminds you why this matters. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Faith here is not simply believing God is capable, it is believing he will, and moving accordingly, as though the promise is already alive in your circumstances, even before it is visible. A missed call gets returned without the usual hesitation, dialed back within minutes instead of being left for another day. That small shift in response time says something honest about readiness. Engagement rarely announces itself with fanfare. It shows up in the ordinary decision to respond promptly instead of letting opportunity sit untouched. This week, identify one specific place where you have been waiting passively for God to move something you are actually equipped to move yourself. It might be a conversation you have been postponing, an application you have been avoiding, a decision you have delayed under the guise of prayerful patience when it has actually become simple avoidance. Take one concrete step in that area before the week ends. Disengagement is not humility, it is delay wearing a spiritual disguise. Genuine patience and disguised avoidance can feel remarkably similar from the inside, so it helps to know how to tell them apart. Genuine patience is peaceful even while it waits, engaged in preparation, and honest about what it does not yet know. Avoidance tends to produce a low, persistent unease whenever the topic surfaces, along with a pattern of finding just enough reasons to delay one more week, then another, indefinitely. If you notice that pattern in yourself, the honest posture is not more waiting. It is admitting the delay has stopped being spiritual and started being fear, wearing patience as a disguise. Matthew 9 verse 29 records something worth carrying with you into that step. According to your faith be it unto you. Not according to a flawless plan, not according to a perfect record. according to your faith, exercised imperfectly but genuinely, in exactly the moment it was required rather than after every uncertainty had been eliminated first. 4. This is bigger than money. What is being released is not limited to a number in an account. When heaven moves, it moves holistically, touching not only what you need but who you are becoming in the process. This is restoration, not merely provision. Let us not reduce the vault of heaven to something as small as a figure on a bank statement. Yes, God provides materially, and yes, that provision matters genuinely. But the blessing being released reaches further, into the broken places you stopped mentioning in prayer because they felt beyond repair, into the hidden corners you assumed no one, including God, was still paying attention to. Joel 2 verse 25 promises, "And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten." That restoration reaches beyond currency lost. It is about time, hope, and strength that felt wasted during barren seasons, all of it being accounted for and returned. Psalm 23 verse 3 declares, "He restoreth my soul, he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake." Restoration here reaches past your circumstances into your actual identity, the parts of you quietly worn down by seasons you rarely mention out loud anymore. 3 John 1 verse 2 gives the fullest picture of what is actually being released. "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth." God's concern was never only for your wallet. It has always included your spirit, your soul, and your body together as one connected whole rather than separate categories competing for attention. The recipe card, kept for years from someone who no longer needs to explain how to make it, sits quietly in a drawer as something worth more than its ingredients. Value does not always look like currency. Sometimes it looks like exactly this, something small carrying weight that no price tag could ever accurately capture. If you have been measuring what is coming purely by financial terms, widen your expectation. Look for what will heal what money alone could never touch, the mind that has felt scattered, the heart still tender from old wounds, the identity that was quietly diminished by seasons of lack. That is what is actually being restored. Here is a simple way to check whether you are actually recognizing the fuller restoration or only tracking the financial piece. At the end of each day this week, ask not only what changed in your circumstances, but what changed in your peace, your clarity, your capacity to forgive, your sense of who you actually are. Write both answers down side by side if it helps. Most people default to noticing only the measurable column. Training yourself to notice the immeasurable one too is often what allows the fuller restoration to actually register instead of passing by unnoticed underneath the visible provision. A particular danger comes from measuring a genuinely spiritual restoration only in material terms, because it sets you up to miss the deeper transfer even while celebrating a smaller one. A person can receive significant financial provision and still walk away from a season without the healing that provision was actually meant to accompany. Do not settle for the smaller category of blessing simply because it is easier to count. 5. He's answering the tears you stopped talking about. Somewhere inside you sits a place you rarely let anyone see, where the weight of life pressed so heavily you eventually stopped knowing what to even pray for anymore. What is coming is not only an answer for the needs you have spoken aloud, it is an answer for what you cried about in private and assumed no one noticed. It is easy to believe God responds quickly to visible needs, the illness, the broken relationship, the empty account, while assuming the quieter wounds simply have to wait their turn or go unaddressed entirely. But his attention was never limited to what was easiest to name. He has been reaching toward the bruises no one else could see the entire time, even during the years you assumed those particular wounds were simply permanent. Psalm 56 verse 8 says, "Thou tellest my wanderings, put thou my tears into thy bottle, are they not in thy book?" Your pain was never invisible to heaven. Every tear you assumed went unrecorded was actually sacred communication, understood fully even when you had no words left to offer. Romans 8 verse 26 explains something worth holding on to here. The Spirit itself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. When you did not know what to pray for, that silence was not absence. It was intercession happening on your behalf in a language deeper than words. A seatbelt gets clicked out of pure habit before the car has even started moving, a small automatic gesture built from years of repetition. Habits like that reveal something true about what has quietly shaped us without our full awareness. Some of your deepest wounds have been shaping your responses the same way, quietly, automatically, longer than you probably realized. What is coming reaches into exactly that kind of formation, not just the visible circumstances, but the patterns underneath them. Isaiah 61 verse 3 speaks of an exchange, beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. That exchange is not simply poetic. It is personal, addressed to the specific weight you have carried longer than anyone around you realized. This week, allow yourself to name honestly, even if only in prayer, one tear you never fully explained to anyone. You do not need to perform strength in front of God. He was already present for the version of you that could not find the words the first time. Suppressing pain and simply not yet having language for it are not the same thing, and learning to tell them apart matters for genuine healing. Suppression avoids the feeling entirely, changing the subject internally whenever it surfaces. Unlabeled grief is different. It sits honestly with the ache without yet knowing how to describe it in words. A helpful practice here is simply describing the physical sensation rather than reaching immediately for an explanation. Where does the weight sit in your body? What does it feel like? When does it tend to surface? Naming the sensation, even without fully understanding its cause, is often the first honest step toward eventually understanding what it has actually been carrying. Certain pain often never makes it into a formed prayer for a specific reason. Some grief is too tangled, too complicated by shame or confusion, to translate cleanly into words a person feels comfortable saying out loud, even privately. That inability to articulate it does not mean God missed it. Romans 8 verse 26 exists precisely for that gap, covering exactly what your own vocabulary was never sufficient to carry on its own. 6. This is restoration, not compensation. A meaningful difference separates God handing you back what was taken, as though simply balancing a ledger, from God rebuilding something entirely upgraded from what was lost. What is happening now is the second one, not a refund, but a redemption. A compensation implies debt being settled, an even exchange that simply restores what was already fair before. Redemption implies something greater, an outcome that exceeds the original loss so significantly that the loss itself becomes almost secondary to the story of what God eventually built from it. That is the category of restoration actually being described here, not the smaller one. Zechariah 9 verse 12 calls you a prisoner of hope and promises to restore double what was lost. Double is not merely more. It is a different category of return altogether, reflecting a God whose restoration multiplies rather than simply replaces. Job's story illustrates this precisely. Job 42 verse 10 records that after Job prayed for his friends, God restored his fortunes and gave him twice what he had before. But notice what actually changed in Job beyond the numbers. He was not simply richer, he was deeper, having encountered God directly in ways his earlier comfort had never required. Isaiah 58 verse 12 promises that ancient ruins will be rebuilt and foundations long devastated will be raised up. Far from patchwork repair, this is new groundwork entirely, laid beneath what was broken, so that what rises this time can actually hold weight the previous structure never could. What broke you is not being discarded, it is becoming part of the material used to build what comes next. The battles that left scars are not separate from the strength you now carry, they produced it. The delay you endured was not wasted time. It was durability being formed in exactly the shape required to carry what is now being released. This blessing was never a recycled version of what you lost. It is a genuine upgrade, fitted specifically to the person the waiting shaped you into becoming, someone the earlier version of you would not yet have been ready to carry. A restoration mindset and an entitlement mindset are worth telling apart because the two can sound similar but produce very different fruit. Entitlement says the world owes you compensation for what you suffered, and it tends to arrive demanding, comparing, and resentful when the timeline or amount does not match expectation. A restoration mindset says something quite different. Gratitude for what is coming, paired with humility about the process that produced it. One useful way to check your own posture honestly is to ask whether you feel more focused on what you deserve or more focused on what you have learned. The second posture is far more likely to actually steward what arrives wisely, without it slipping through hands, still shaped by old scarcity or bitterness. Consider how differently the earlier version of you might have handled this same level of provision or favor. Without the depth formed through the waiting, abundance can just as easily produce carelessness as it can produce gratitude. The maturity gained through your specific season of restoration is not incidental to what is coming. It is the actual qualification that makes you ready to steward it well, rather than being overwhelmed or corrupted by it. 7. You're not being blessed, you're being commissioned. This is not simply a reward for surviving difficulty. It is a release with direction attached to it. God is not only answering your prayers for breakthrough, He is positioning you to become breakthrough for someone else who is still waiting for theirs. This is where heaven's generosity and heaven's assignment collide. God does not pour out simply for the pleasure of pouring. He pours with purpose attached, entrusting resources, favor, and open doors not as personal trophies, but as tools placed in your hands for something larger than your own comfort. Luke 12, verse 48 says plainly, "For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required." What is being entrusted to you now is not meant to end with your own comfort. It is meant to move through you, reaching people and situations your current vantage point cannot yet see. Matthew 10, verse 8 puts it directly, "Freely ye have received, freely give." What has been placed in your hands is not yours to hoard. It is yours to steward, carried forward rather than kept sealed away for personal use alone. A signature line, left blank for months, finally gets filled out, the pen finally moving after long hesitation. That single completed signature often marks far more than a bureaucratic step. It marks a decision to actually step into responsibility that had been quietly avoided. This week, identify one specific way your breakthrough, however small it currently looks, could become someone else's lifeline. It might be a conversation, a resource, a piece of encouragement you have hesitated to share because it felt too small to matter. Offer it anyway. Commissioning rarely waits for you to feel fully qualified before it starts requiring something of you. Stewardship like this requires wisdom, not just generosity, and it helps to have a simple filter for deciding where to actually give of what you have received. Ask whether the giving comes from genuine conviction or from guilt about having more than someone else. Ask whether it is sustainable or whether it will leave you unable to steward your own responsibilities well. Genuine commissioning does not require depleting yourself to the point of collapse. It requires consistent, wise generosity that can actually be sustained over years rather than one dramatic gesture that leaves nothing behind for the next opportunity. Isaiah 60 verse 1 calls out, "Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee." Notice this is not an invitation to bask privately in your own increase. It is a summons to rise specifically so that light can reach places still sitting in shadow, places your own breakthrough now makes you uniquely positioned to reach. 8. This blessing breaks generational silings. What is being released now is not only for your hands to hold. It reaches toward people whose faces you may never see, generations who will inherit what you chose to walk in today. You are positioned as a pivot point in your own family line, the place where old patterns finally end. Every family carries patterns, some healthy and worth preserving, others harmful and worth interrupting. What made those harmful patterns so difficult to break in previous generations was rarely a lack of desire. It was usually a lack of resource, whether emotional, spiritual, or practical to actually sustain a different choice long enough for it to take root. What is being released to you now supplies exactly that missing resource. Deuteronomy 7 verse 9 declares that God keeps covenant and mercy to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. What is shifting in you now carries weight that extends far beyond your own lifetime. Psalm 112 verse 1-3 promises that the children of those who fear the Lord will be mighty in the land, their generation blessed, wealth and riches in their house. Far from abstract poetry, this describes an actual trajectory set in motion by decisions made in exactly this kind of moment. What stopped with the generations before you does not have to continue simply because it always has. Genesis 50 verse 20 records Joseph's own reflection on his suffering. What was intended for harm, God intended for good, to bring about the saving of many lives. The same principle applies to whatever painful pattern has run through your own family. It does not have final authority over what comes next, not anymore. You are not incidental in this story. You are the one who will eventually tell your own children exactly where the old pattern ended and the new one began. That is not pressure, it is privilege, carried forward by someone who was finally willing to interrupt what had gone unchallenged for far too long. This kind of generational shift rarely happens through a single dramatic moment. It happens through consistent, ordinary choices repeated over years. Choices to forgive instead of repeat old bitterness. Choices to steward resources wisely instead of repeating old patterns of scarcity thinking. Choices to speak differently over your own children than the way certain words were once spoken over you. The transfer being released now equips you for exactly that kind of sustained, quiet faithfulness. Begin this work by naming one specific generational pattern honestly, whether it is financial anxiety, emotional distance, unresolved conflict avoidance, or something else entirely. Then identify one concrete, opposite behavior you can practice consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, starting this week. If the pattern was financial fear, that might look like actually reviewing your finances instead of avoiding them. If the pattern was emotional silence, that might look like naming one feeling out loud to someone you trust instead of burying it. Generational patterns rarely break through good intentions alone. They break through specific, repeated, opposite action, sustained long enough to become the new normal. 9. You're not too late, you're right on time. A particular kind of relief comes from realizing you were never forgotten. You were reserved. What felt like delay in your own eyes was frequently divine design in God's, timed precisely rather than simply late. We tend to measure our own progress against earthly clocks and calendars, comparing our timeline against everyone else's visible milestones. But God's timing was never bound by those same measurements. The hidden years you walked through were not punishment for something done wrong. They were preparation, quietly forming exactly what would be required to actually steward what is now arriving. Romans 11 verse 29 assures you, "For the gifts and calling of God are without repentance." What was spoken over your life was never revoked, no matter how long the waiting stretched or how uncertain the silence felt while you were living inside it. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 promises, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time. Though it tarry, wait for it. Because it will surely come, it will not tarry." Tarrying and failing to arrive are two entirely different outcomes. What you have been waiting for was never cancelled. It was simply timed to arrive exactly when you would actually be ready to hold it. The porch light gets flipped on before dark without even thinking about why, a small automatic gesture of readiness for something not yet visible. There is a quiet wisdom in bodies and habits that sometimes trust readiness before the mind has fully caught up to explain it. Trust that same instinct in your spirit right now. Something in you already senses that this moment is not arriving too late. This week, if shame has quietly convinced you that you somehow missed your window, name that lie directly and release it. What is arriving now is not a consolation prize handed out after the real opportunity passed. It is the appointed moment, arriving at the only time it could have actually held what it was designed to deliver. It is worth distinguishing genuine peace about timing from resignation disguised as peace, because they can sound identical when spoken but feel very different underneath. Resignation says it no longer matters because hope has quietly worn out. Genuine peace says the outcome still matters deeply, but trust in the timing has grown steady enough to stop demanding an explanation for the delay. A simple way to check which one you are actually carrying. Does the thought of this promise still stir something alive in you, even gently, or does it produce only flatness and indifference? Aliveness, even quiet aliveness, is peace. Flatness is often resignation wearing peace as language without its substance. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 declares that God makes everything beautiful in its time, not rushed, not random, but beautiful precisely because of when it arrives rather than despite it. If you have spent years comparing your timeline to someone else's, quietly wondering why their breakthrough seemed to come faster or easier, release that comparison now. Their timing was never yours to measure yourself against. Yours has been exact from the beginning. Friend, you did not merely survive the waiting, the warfare, the wilderness seasons behind you. You were shaped by them, positioned by them, and now summoned through them into exactly this moment. Some language here is worth reconsidering. Survival implies barely making it through, limping to the other side with little left to show for the effort. Summoning implies something entirely different, an active calling forward into exactly what the difficulty was preparing you to carry. You are not standing here today merely because you endured. You are standing here because you were being called forward the entire time, even in the seasons that felt like nothing more than getting through one more day. Revelation 3 verse 8 declares, "I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it." That door was not conjured suddenly out of nowhere. It was always yours to walk through, waiting for the moment your readiness finally caught up to the promise. Every tear, every quiet act of endurance nobody witnessed was not simply survival. It was the pathway leading directly here. Isaiah 43 verse 19 whispers into this exact hour, "Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it?" This is not random breakthrough arriving by chance. It is orchestration precisely timed and fully intentional. What you carry now is not only blessing, it is trust, the kind that says something greater than yourself is willing to move through your life in ways you cannot yet fully measure. Rise into what has already been prepared. You are both the miracle and the messenger, carrying forward what was never meant to end with you alone. What is prepared for you exceeds what your eyes have seen or your ears have heard, further than your own imagination could have mapped out on your best day. That is not a promise meant only for a distant heaven someday. It describes exactly the kind of surprising, exceeding provision available even now in this specific season for anyone willing to actually receive it, rather than simply admire it from a distance. Before we close, I want to invite you, right where you are, to pause with me here and bring everything we have walked through into a moment of honest prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before you with hearts wide open, humbled by the weight of this moment. We sense you doing something greater than we can fully see, and we do not want to miss it. We quiet our hearts now, setting aside distraction and hesitation, and declare that we are ready to receive what you have ordained for this hour. Every good and perfect gift comes from your hand. You see beyond what we see, and you give beyond what we know how to ask for. We lift our hands in surrender, not demanding, but simply saying, "Yes, Lord, your will be done, your purpose fulfilled in us." We resist every spirit of doubt, fear, and delay that would try to hinder what you are releasing. Where the enemy has tried to distract us or make us question your goodness, our faith stands firm. We choose to trust your timing and your wisdom over our own limited understanding. God, we thank you that this transfer is not about anything we have earned. It is about you fulfilling what you already planned long before we ever walked into this moment. You saw this hour before we did. You wrote our names on what is being released, and you ordered the timing so that we would actually be ready to carry what you are entrusting to us now. Where there has been weariness, we ask for refreshing. Where there has been loss, We ask for restoration. Where there has been silence, let your voice break through clearly. We want more than provision. We want your presence steady and near. Father, we lift up our families and everyone connected to our lives. May what you pour into us overflow into them. Let this transfer break old chains, heal old wounds, and open eyes to your goodness across generations we may never personally meet. Where we have measured your blessing only in numbers, expand our understanding to receive the fullness of what you intend: peace, identity, healing, and purpose alongside provision. Where doubt has whispered that we are somehow too late or too flawed for this moment, silence that lie completely and replace it with confident trust in your perfect timing. We say today, we are ready. We receive what you have chosen to give. We align ourselves with your purpose, and we step forward in faith, trusting that you will finish exactly what you started in us. In Jesus' name, amen. If this message stirred something real in you, I would love for you to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to trust the Lord's timing today. You never know who has been quietly waiting for exactly this confirmation. Thank you for walking through this with me. Go and open your hands wide. What heaven has prepared, it will not withhold. Carry it forward wisely, steward it faithfully, and let it become a blessing that reaches far beyond your own life alone.